My wife sat across the kitchen island from me on a Tuesday night and told me she'd been sleeping with a coworker for 4 months. Then she reminded me, gently, like she was doing me a favor, of a promise I'd made 8 years earlier, that if she ever cheated and told me herself, I'd find a way to forgive her. I told her I remembered every word of that conversation. What I didn't tell her that night was why I'd actually made that promise, or what I'd spent 8 years quietly doing in case I ever needed to use it. She cried. She said the right things in the right order, like she'd rehearsed them in the car on the way home. I listened to all of it without raising my voice, without leaving the room, without giving her a single sign of what I'd already decided somewhere around the third sentence. I asked her his name, then I asked her, very calmly, for dates. She thought the calm meant I was already halfway to forgiving her. There was no way for her to know that calm was the only setting I had left for a promise I'd never actually intended to keep. Under the table, out of her sight, I opened the Notes app on my phone and started a list. I titled it with her name and the date. It was the same thing I'd done 8 years earlier, the week I made that promise in the first place, except that file had been sitting there, mostly empty, waiting for exactly this. I made that promise 8 years ago because of my brother, not because of any romantic theory about forgiveness. His marriage ran 11 years. His wife's affair ran through 6 of them. By the time he found out, by accident, from a mutual friend who assumed he already knew, half his retirement had been restructured around a business partnership with her father. His kids were settled into a school district he'd only agreed to for her commute, and he had no clean way to undo any of it without losing more than the marriage. I was 26 when I watched that happen to him. I decided, right then, that I would rather offer a fake incentive to keep a betrayal short than ever let one run for 6 silent years. The promise was never about mercy. It was about limiting how much damage I'd have to discover after the fact. Our marriage, for 6 years, was ordinary in the way most marriages are ordinary. 2 kids, a mortgage, a rhythm. I kept my consulting business titled solely in my own name, the way my accountant had set it up before we married and told me to leave alone, and I reviewed our joint statements every month, the way I always had, not out of suspicion, just habit. About 4 months before that Tuesday, her travel schedule for work picked up. One trip ran a day longer than what was on our shared calendar. She started keeping her phone face down more than she used to. None of it told me anything on its own. I noticed it, filed it away, and kept living my life, because I was busy, and because none of it was enough to act on by itself. What told me something was what came out of her mouth 3 months later, and by the time it did, I already had somewhere to put it. She gave me his name that night. I'll call him Grant, a director 2 levels up from her, married himself, with 2 kids close in age to ours. 4 months, multiple overlapping business trips. I asked her, in the same flat tone I'd used to confirm a delivery address, whether the hotel had gone on her company card. She said yes. It was under the trip budget, she said, like that made it smaller instead of larger. That one detail changed the shape of everything. An affair is a betrayal you can, in theory, forgive. A pattern of falsified expense reports is a paper trail, and paper trails don't care what you've promised anyone. She went to bed. I didn't. I pulled up 6 months of our joint statements and matched them against the travel calendar we shared. I found 2 hotel charges, $940 combined, on nights she'd told me she was home. Neither matched a trip on our calendar. I kept going back and found a third, 7 months old, that I'd never once questioned at the time. I opened the file on my phone from 8 years earlier. It had exactly 1 entry in it, from the week I made the promise, her name, and a date, and nothing else. I added the 3 hotel charges under it. Then I renamed the file. It used to just say her name. Now it said, the 4 months. I want to be precise about what I felt doing that, because it wasn't rage and it wasn't grief, even though I'd earned the right to both. It was the specific stillness of someone who has just stopped waiting for something and started building it instead. I didn't confront her again that night, or the next morning, or the morning after that. I made her breakfast. I packed our kids' lunches. I told her nothing had changed yet, because as far as she needed to know, nothing had. What she didn't understand was that the 8-year-old promise had never been a bridge back to us. It had only ever been a trigger, built to go off exactly once, and I just heard it click. The next morning I called the attorney who'd handled my business incorporation for 9 years. No cold start, no search for someone new, just a conversation with someone who already knew my finances better than my wife did. I asked her one specific question. In our state, what happens to marital assets that get spent down by one spouse during an affair, and does a business kept solely in my name since before the marriage stay protected? The answer to both questions was better than I'd hoped. Dissipation of assets claims are real. What she'd spent could be clawed back, dollar for dollar, out of her share. And 6 years of scrupulously keeping my business separate, on my accountant's advice, meant none of it was ever on the table to begin with. I spent the next 10 days building a file my attorney could actually use. Not a phone note anymore, an evidence packet, full statement history, the 3 undisclosed hotel charges, a side-by-side of our shared calendar against the actual dates. And one more thing I found only because I went looking for it specifically, a printed copy of a night she'd told me she was in a client meeting, cross-checked against the client's own website, which showed their office closed for a federal holiday that day. That was a Tuesday. 10 days later, I had a folder with 14 documents in it, an attorney who told me exactly which 6 of them mattered, and a filing date already picked. I want to be direct about something. I did not suggest counseling. I did not propose a trial separation to figure things out. 8 years of quietly preparing for this exact moment had already been the conversation, as far as I was concerned, and I wasn't going to spend a 9th year having it out loud for her benefit. I filed. She was served on an ordinary Thursday, at home, by my attorney's process server, not at her office, not in front of anyone, not for spectacle. Precise. Total. Not cruel for its own sake, just complete. The same week, I filed a separate, one-time report to Grant's company's ethics line. Not an anonymous complaint, a dated account with the 3 charges and the client's holiday calendar attached, addressed as what it actually was, misuse of a corporate travel card for personal expenses. I wasn't reporting an affair. Companies don't investigate affairs. They investigate fraud. Grant was placed on administrative leave within the week. I sent one message to Grant's wife, not a campaign. One message, dated, with the receipts I had direct standing to share, because they involved my own money in our own joint account. I didn't call her a second time. I didn't post anything anywhere. I didn't bring our kids or hers into it. I decided she deserved the same complete picture I'd just spent 10 days assembling for myself, and that withholding it from her, at that point, would have made me exactly as dishonest as the 2 people who'd already lied to both of us for 4 months. Here is what the settlement actually looked like, 6 months later. No house. It had been titled to me since before the marriage, and it stayed that way. 41% of the retirement accounts instead of an even 50, because the dissipation claim removed $6,200 in traced spending from her side of the ledger before the split was even calculated. A custody schedule that gave me 4 weekdays instead of the even split she'd walked in expecting, because the gap between her calendar and her actual whereabouts was no longer something only I knew. It was in the court record, and the judge cited it directly when discussing stability. She said one thing to me at the settlement meeting that I'll repeat exactly because it's the only line from that day worth keeping. She said, "You told me you'd forgive me." I told her the truth. I said I'd told her I'd try. I said I'd decided exactly how hard I was willing to try 8 years earlier. The year I watched my brother find out 10 years too late and lose the ability to protect anything by the time he did. I said I was never going to be him. Then I let my attorney handle the rest of the meeting, because I'd already said the only thing I needed to. Grant's investigation confirmed the card misuse within 3 weeks. He was terminated. A much easier case for his employer to act on than anything to do with his personal life, and one his employer had no reluctance about acting on quickly. What happened to his marriage after his wife read that one message, I only know secondhand, because I never asked and nobody offered. I don't take credit for it. I only know it didn't survive the year. By the time all of it settled, the divorce, the ethics investigation, the custody order, she wasn't the one narrating the story to your mutual friends anymore. For the first time in 4 months, the facts got there before she did. Here's what's true, specifically, as of today. She lives in a 2-bedroom rental across town. I have the kids 4 days a week and every other weekend, and the arrangement has held for a year without a single missed exchange. Because for once, the paperwork behind it is airtight instead of assumed. Grant lost his job and, as far as I know, his marriage, neither of which I engineered beyond reporting what was true and telling one other person what she had a right to know. The retirement split is final. The house was never actually a question. And the folder I started 8 years ago, the one with her name and one date in it, the one that sat empty for 8 years except for that single line, I deleted it the week the settlement was signed because it had finally done the only job it was ever built for. I'm not going to tell you I feel guilty about how thorough I was, because I don't, and I've stopped pretending otherwise for the sake of a tidier story. She didn't lose the house, half her retirement, and her boyfriend's marriage because I'm vindictive. She lost all of it because she spent 4 months assuming a promise from 8 years ago was still soft, and I spent 8 years quietly making sure that if I ever needed it, it wouldn't be. I don't have a gentle lesson to leave you with, and I'm done pretending one exists. Some people get caught the same week. Some people get caught 8 years after the promise that was supposed to protect them, and by then, the person holding it has had 8 years to decide exactly how it's going to go. I don't know which one you are yet. I only know which one I decided to be, a long time before I ever needed to. If you've ever made someone a promise you never actually intended to keep, not out of cruelty, just out of knowing exactly what you'd need it for one day, I want to hear about it. That's most of why I tell these. Drop the comment if you made it to the end. I read every one.